And I want you to take a look at a knife and realize, especially in kitchen knives, especially boning knives, when they're worn out. It's worth saving a sporting knife. It's not worth saving a boning knife. This knife is worn out. You can sharpen it, but the edge is moved up into such a thick part of the blade that even if it's sharp, it's not going to cut very well. But this knife is worth saving. So it's old, it's worn down, and the angle on the edge is getting quite steep. So what we're going to do is thin the knife. And that's where we use the 120 stone. So we put some marker on it and switch to the 120. Now this and the 220 both require a little more water than the finer stones to keep them clear. And you'll see how the water just sinks into this really fast. This is a really open grit stone. Now there's two ways I can sharpen this knife. If the knife was a little bit shorter, I could sharpen it on the flat. And if you're resting on the flat of the blade, the angle reads correctly. So I'm off at 21 degrees, I'm sharpening it at exactly 21 degrees. But most knives I have to sharpen on the flat, most sporting knives you have to sharpen on the flat. And that changes the angle by about anywhere from 4 to 6 degrees. So if I set the angle, if I want 21 degrees on the knife, I set the knife up on the flat where I can easily start a bevel at the back of the knife. Here, let me set the knife guide here before I get too carried away here. So on the flat of the knife, right in front of the handle, I can start a 21 degree bevel. And then I'll move off onto the flat where I'm actually going to sharpen it. And I put some marker on that bevel that I just cut. Raise the pivot until I'm removing the marker, which is coming off clean. And now I'm up at about 25 degrees, but I know that the angle I'm putting on the knife is exactly 21. But say this is and this is a very old knife, and it had gotten very thick. So I want to save this knife. I want to rehabilitate it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop way down to 15 degrees, and I'm going to cut a relief angle behind the main angle. Way back, like that. So what happened to this knife, the original bevel kept getting wider and wider and wider as the edge moved up into the thicker part of the blade. And once the bevel reaches about 2 millimeters wide, the knife becomes very difficult to sharpen because you can't get a clean cut to the edge on a bevel that's over 2 millimeters. So what I want to do is I want to make the primary bevel much, much narrower. I want to get down to under 1 millimeter. So I'll keep grinding away on the back of the knife. And here's the other difference. You notice I'm not moving the knife. Sporting knives, up to 8 inches. And then even an 8-inch knife, you just have to move it a little bit to get the edge over towards the side of the machine. But this knife, I can do the whole blade without moving it because the knife is stiff enough to support the stone out away from the blade table. Like that. So I'll just keep grinding away until I get my bevel down to under 1 millimeter, which we've already done. We did on this knife a long time ago. But I think you can see it. So if you look at that, you can see that the black is less than 1 millimeter. So now I've got the knife thinned out to the point where it's going to have a nice narrow bevel on it at a reasonable angle. And the knife will once again cut with much less effort. If you've got a really steep angle on a thick knife, it's just not going to cut well.